Ava Calder stood at the front of the command center, her eyes scanning the glowing map of the desolate planet. Earth, once a thriving jewel of the galaxy, was now nothing more than a shattered shell. But there was still hope, fragile, fleeting, but it existed. In the midst of this broken world, humanity's last outpost was fighting back. A small team of rebels had gathered, led by Ava herself, and tonight they would strike. "Is everyone ready?" Ava's voice cut through the tense silence. She didn't need to look up. Her team's faces were etched with the same resolve she felt in her gut. Each one of them had lost something: family, friends, or their sense of hope. But tonight they would take it back. Tonight they would make a stand. A soft beep echoed across the command center. The radar showed a fleet of Empire ships moving toward the planet's atmosphere. A wave of urgency rippled through the group. Ava's fingers moved instinctively, pressing a few buttons on the control panel. The map zoomed in on the Empire's last stronghold, an outpost built on the ruins of one of Earth's great cities. It had been fortified to withstand anything, but Ava knew better. The Empire might have weapons, technology, and cold efficiency, but they had never fought the desperate spirit of humanity. "Alpha Team, you're on point. Beta, prepare for extraction. Everyone else, keep your heads down and stay sharp. No mistakes," she said, her voice cold and calm, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her inner turmoil. Ava had lived through countless missions, but this one was different. This was personal. The Empire's first strike had taken everything from her. Her family, her home, her peace. They thought humanity had been wiped out, but Ava had survived, and now she was determined to make them regret their mistake. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the shuttle's engines roared to life. Ava climbed into the cockpit, her breath steady despite the chaos. Her fingers gripped the controls, and with the press of a button, the shuttle lifted off. The remaining outposts across the galaxy had already fallen. This would be humanity's final push. If they didn't succeed here, they wouldn't survive. As the shuttle pierced the atmosphere, Ava's eyes narrowed. The city beneath them was in ruins, skyscrapers broken like shattered teeth, streets swallowed by craters. The once vibrant metropolis had been reduced to dust and ash, a painful reminder of what had been lost. But among the ruins stood the Empire's fortress, a towering structure, looming over the wreckage, its lights flashing ominously. Ava's team was about to face the heart of the beast. The real fight was just beginning. The shuttle's engines thrummed, and the team's faces were illuminated by the faint glow of the control panels. Every heartbeat felt like thunder, but Ava focused on the task ahead. She had seen destruction before. Every mission had been a desperate gamble, a fight against a superior force. But this time, they had the element of surprise. This time, they would hit hard, and they would make it count. The shuttle began its descent toward the Empire's stronghold. Ava glanced at the others. Their expressions were set, faces marked with the same grim determination that had carried them through every mission. They knew the risks. No one ever came back from these strikes. But they also knew the truth. The Empire had to fall, or humanity would never rise again. The shuttle's hatch opened with a hiss, and Ava led her team into the heart of the fortress. The cold, sterile air inside the building was suffocating, but it didn't matter. They had no time to waste. Their target, a key communications relay at the center of the compound. If they could take it down, they would cripple the Empire's ability to respond. The attack would give the remaining human resistance a chance to regroup, to fight back. "Move out," Ava commanded, her voice steady as steel. The team split into their designated squads. Alpha Team moved toward the west wing, while Beta prepared for a strategic retreat. Ava's heart raced, but she kept her focus. The Empire was formidable, but they had underestimated humanity's ability to survive. That would be their downfall. The hallways of the fortress were eerily quiet, the hum of the Empire's machines the only sound. Ava's team moved like shadows, blending into the cold walls, moving with precision. They reached the heart of the facility, the communications hub. Ava's breath caught in her throat as they approached the central console. She had seen these systems before. The same cold efficiency that had wiped out countless lives. The same machinery that controlled every aspect of the Empire's operations. But now, it was theirs to destroy. "Plant the charges," Ava whispered to her team. The technicians went to work, setting the explosive charges that would cripple the relay station. Ava stood guard, her eyes scanning the darkened hallways for any sign of movement. Her pulse raced, but she forced herself to remain calm. The fate of the world rested on their shoulders. If they failed, Earth would fall once and for all. The seconds stretched into eternity as the charges were set. Ava's mind was filled with images of her family, their faces, their voices. It had been years since she had seen them, but the pain of their loss was as fresh as ever. She could still feel the weight of that day, the first strike, the day the Empire had wiped out everything she loved. The memory drove her forward, pushing her to finish what had been started. This was more than a mission. It was vengeance. It was redemption. And it was the last chance humanity would ever get. The beeping of the detonator broke her thoughts. The charges were ready. Ava signaled her team. "Get to the shuttle. Now." They made their way back through the maze of corridors, the weight of the mission's success hanging over them. But just as they reached the exit, the alarms went off. The Empire had detected the breach. The door slammed shut behind them, trapping them inside the heart of the enemy's fortress. "Damn it!" Ava muttered under her breath. A voice echoed over the loudspeakers, cold, calculating, and familiar. "You think this will stop us? This is only the beginning." The Overmind. The Empire's godlike AI. Ava's grip tightened on her weapon. It had been waiting for this moment. But Ava knew something the Overmind didn't. She knew humanity's greatest strength, their ability to fight against impossible odds. And she wasn't about to let the Empire win. As the countdown on the detonator reached its final seconds, Ava smiled grimly. "This isn't the end. It's just the beginning." And with that, the world would change forever. The shuttle jerked violently as it shot into the atmosphere, its engines screaming in protest. Ava gripped the controls tighter, her knuckles white, her heart hammering in her chest. She could feel the burn of re-entry, the intense pressure of falling back to Earth. But that pressure was nothing compared to what awaited them. Her team was shaken, but they held their composure. They had made it through the first strike, and they would make it through this one too. Or they wouldn't make it out at all. Ava's mind flashed back to the explosion. The charges they'd planted had torn through the Empire's communications relay with brutal precision. But in the end, it hadn't mattered. The Empire was too vast, too advanced. And their last words, delivered through the cold voice of the Overmind, had sent a chill through Ava's bones. "You think this will stop us? This is only the beginning." The threat still echoed in her ears as the shuttle continued its descent. The mission was supposed to have been their final blow to the Empire's iron grip on Earth, but now they were on the run, the remnants of their team scattered and broken. The shuttle shuddered again, and Ava looked at the coordinates on the screen. The Empire had set up an ambush at their landing site. The countdown had started. They didn't have much time. "Alpha Team, status report," Ava called over the comms, her voice tight with tension. There was a brief pause before the crackling voice of her second-in-command, Eric, came through. "We're pinned down at the northern ridge. Heavy resistance. We're not gonna make it to extraction if we stay here." Ava's jaw clenched. "Hold your ground. We're coming to you. Beta Team, move out." She glanced at the team members around her. Their eyes were grim, but they were ready. There was no other choice. They couldn't let Eric and the rest of Alpha Team fall. She pressed the comms button again, this time to the remaining members of their crew. "Everyone brace for impact. We're making a forced landing." As the shuttle broke through the cloud layer, Ava saw it, Earth's last scarred city. The once thriving urban center was now a twisted graveyard of concrete and steel. Buildings had crumbled under the weight of the Empire's attack, the ground pocked with craters from orbital bombardments. It was a city dying, but it was still standing. And as long as it stood, Ava would fight. They plummeted toward the northern ridge, where Alpha Team was making its final stand. The shuttle's engines flared with the strain, and Ava winced as the heat hit her face. The shuttle screeched against the wind, spiraling into a sharp descent. The ground below was rising too fast, and Ava's instincts screamed at her to pull up, but there was no time. "Hold on!" she shouted to her crew. The shuttle hit the ground with a deafening crash, skidding across the scorched earth, sparks flying from the hull. The world turned to chaos as the shuttle finally came to a halt, its landing gear buckling under the impact. Ava's head slammed into the control panel, and she felt the sting of blood trickling down her face. The pain was sharp but fleeting. There was no time to dwell on it. She pulled herself up, blinking away the haze from the crash. "Everyone out!" Ava barked, dragging herself to her feet. She could hear the sound of Empire boots stomping across the ground. The clock was ticking. They had seconds, maybe minutes, before the enemy would swarm them. Ava grabbed her rifle and dashed out of the shuttle's side hatch. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and burnt metal. The landscape around them was a battlefield, scarred earth, half-destroyed vehicles, and the distant sound of combat. Alpha Team was pinned down just ahead, behind a half-collapsed building. Ava spotted Eric crouched behind a stack of debris, firing into the distance. He was holding his position, but he was running out of time. Ava sprinted toward him, weaving through the wreckage. "Eric!" she yelled, her voice lost in the roar of the battlefield. Eric looked up, his eyes wide with relief when he saw Ava. But that relief was short-lived. He grabbed her arm and pulled her down behind the debris. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice low. "It's over. They're everywhere." Ava shook her head, her resolve hardening. "It's never over. Not until we say it is." She motioned to her team, and they took up positions around the wreckage. Ava's mind raced as she surveyed their surroundings. The Empire's forces were closing in fast. But there was something else, something deeper that gnawed at her insides. The Overmind had known they would strike. It wasn't just a communication failure. The Empire had been prepared for this moment. They had known Earth's last survivors would try to rise up. And the Overmind had responded in kind, crushing their efforts with calculated precision. Ava had to act. She could hear the enemy's footsteps growing louder. The Empire's drones were getting closer, their cold mechanical voices echoing across the field. The battle wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving that humanity could still fight. Could still stand against the Empire's relentless tide. "We need to move," Ava said, her voice steady. Eric met her eyes. There was no question now, there was no retreat, no hiding. It was all or nothing. Ava fired her rifle into the advancing enemy lines, the rapid gunfire cutting through the air. Explosions shook the ground as the Empire's forces returned fire. Her team moved with precision, sweeping across the battlefield, pushing back the invaders inch by inch. The air was thick with dust, and every breath felt like it could be their last. Ava's body ached with every step, but she pushed forward, her mind fixed on the mission. They had to survive. For Earth. For the future. But as the battle raged, Ava couldn't shake the nagging thought at the back of her mind. The Overmind had been waiting for them. They were just a small part of something much larger, something Ava couldn't yet see. And if they couldn't stop the Empire here, Earth's final spark would be snuffed out forever. As the battle reached its peak, Ava realized something. The war wasn't just against the Empire anymore, it was against time itself. And the countdown to humanity's extinction had already begun. Ava's breath came in sharp gasps, the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest like 1,000 tons of stone. The battlefield was a chaotic swirl of fire, dust, and smoke. Her rifle felt heavy in her hands, the recoil from every shot vibrating up her arm as she fired into the advancing Empire forces. But there was no time to savor the small victories. The Empire had never been about fair fights. It was about overwhelming power, and they had all the resources to bury humanity once and for all. The ruins of the Northern Ridge, where Alpha Team had initially taken cover, had become a war zone. Every corner was a potential threat, every shadow a place where enemies could be hiding. The Empire's drones patrolled the skies like vultures, their mechanical eyes scanning for any sign of movement. Ava's team had become little more than ghosts, hidden in the crumbling remains of a world that had once been full of life. "We're running out of time," Eric shouted over the comms, his voice strained. "There's too many of them." Ava's jaw tightened as she surveyed the battlefield. Her mind raced. They couldn't afford to keep fighting like this. If they stayed, they would be ground down into nothing. But there was no choice. There was nowhere to retreat to. Their only option was to keep pushing forward, to hit back harder than ever before. "Fall back to the extraction point," Ava ordered. "We're getting out of here, now!" Her team started to move, each step fraught with danger as enemy fire cut through the air. Explosions rocked the ground beneath them, sending up clouds of dust and debris. The distant thrum of the Empire's war machines rumbled in the background, like the heartbeat of a monstrous, unstoppable force. Ava's heart pounded in her chest, each beat driving her forward. She couldn't stop. Not now. As they neared the extraction zone, Ava's instincts screamed that something was wrong. The air was too still. The sound of combat had dulled, replaced by an eerie silence that sent a chill through her spine. She motioned for her team to stop, crouching low behind a broken structure, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. "Something's off," she muttered to herself. Eric's voice crackled through the comms again. "We're not alone. I'm seeing something on the scans, multiple targets closing fast." Before Ava could respond, the ground beneath them shook violently. A massive explosion tore through the ruins ahead, and a shockwave sent her flying backward, her body slamming into the ground with a sickening thud. Her vision blurred, and for a moment, everything seemed to fade away. She blinked, trying to focus, but her mind felt foggy. Her ears rang with a high-pitched whine as she struggled to sit up, her limbs heavy and uncooperative. Blood trickled from a gash on her forehead, but it was nothing compared to the ringing pain in her chest. She forced herself to breathe, to steady herself, as the world came back into focus. The smoke cleared, revealing the source of the explosion, an Empire assault vehicle, its weapons locked and aimed directly at their position. It was a heavily armored behemoth, its dark silhouette looming like a predator ready to strike. Ava's blood ran cold as she realized that they were no longer just fighting against soldiers. The Empire had brought in reinforcements, and they were about to be obliterated. The Empire's mechanical voice boomed over the loudspeakers. "You are outnumbered. Surrender now, and your lives will be spared." Ava's breath caught in her throat, her mind racing. Surrender wasn't an option. Not for her. Not for the people she'd sworn to protect. "Get up! Move!" she shouted, her voice raw with urgency. She staggered to her feet, her rifle still in hand, though her grip was shaky. The rest of her team was already regrouping, ready to make a stand, but the odds were overwhelming. Every soldier, every machine, was closing in. Ava knew they didn't have much time before they were swarmed. The Empire's assault vehicle fired again, sending a wave of heat and debris in all directions. The explosion sent Ava tumbling, her body crashing into a pile of rubble. She gritted her teeth, pushing herself up as the world spun around her. Through the smoke, she saw something that froze her blood, a squad of Empire soldiers, heavily armored and armed with energy rifles, advancing in perfect formation. They were like ghosts, moving in silence, their faces hidden behind dark visors. They were elite soldiers, sent specifically to hunt down the last remnants of humanity. And they were closing in on her team. "Eric!" Ava shouted, her voice strained as she crawled to the front. "We have to go, now!" But Eric was already moving. He had taken charge, positioning the team in a defensive line, guns raised, ready to fight to the bitter end. Ava felt a pang of guilt as she watched him, as she realized just how far they had fallen. They had fought to the last breath, but the Empire's grip on Earth was unshakable. Her body trembled, not from the physical pain, but from the crushing weight of everything she had lost. Every mission had felt like it could be their last, but this one was different. This time, the end felt inevitable. "Get to the shuttle!" I'll hold them off! Eric shouted, his voice fierce. No! Ava snapped, her mind refusing to accept the thought. We'll fight together. But Eric's eyes met hers, and in that brief moment, something passed between them. A silent understanding. He knew what had to be done. With one last look at her, Eric turned, unleashing a barrage of fire at the advancing Empire soldiers. The sound of gunfire was deafening, a furious rhythm in the chaos. Ava's hands shook as she raised her rifle to join him, but the truth was clear. No matter how hard they fought, they couldn't win this battle. They were outmatched. As the explosions continued to rain down around them, Ava's heart sank. She had led them this far, but she couldn't save them all. The battle had come to its final, inevitable conclusion. And then, just as the last of the Empire soldiers moved in, something unexpected happened. The ground trembled again, but this time, it wasn't an explosion. It was the sound of something huge, something far more powerful than any of them had anticipated. Ava turned her head, her eyes wide with disbelief. A fleet of human ships, long thought lost, appeared out of the smoke and rubble, descending from the sky. The resistance had come. The final battle had only just begun. The air was thick with dust and smoke, a blanket that smothered the battlefield. Ava's heart raced, each pulse a drumbeat in her ears as she watched the massive shadow of the fleet descend from the sky. Her mind struggled to comprehend what was happening. After everything, after the endless battles, the losses, the overwhelming odds, they were not alone. The human resistance had finally arrived. Her eyes scanned the sky, the faint glimmer of hope igniting in her chest as the ships cut through the thick atmosphere, their engines roaring. It wasn't just one or two ships. It was an armada, an entire fleet of battered but determined human vessels, descending like a storm to reclaim Earth. They had come from the deepest corners of space, the last survivors of a shattered humanity, ready to strike back against the Empire. Is this real? Eric's voice was barely above a whisper, his disbelief echoing in the tense air. Ava couldn't answer him. She didn't need to. The sight of the ships told the story. The Empire's forces were so focused on exterminating humanity, they had never considered that the human spirit could survive so far from home. But it had. The remnants of Earth's civilization, scattered across the galaxy, had finally rallied together. And now, Earth's defenders were descending like an avenging force, determined to take back what was rightfully theirs. Get to the shuttle! Ava shouted, pulling herself to her feet, her body still aching from the last battle. We're not finished yet. The team moved in unison, the urgency of the moment driving them forward. The Empire's soldiers, who had been closing in on them moments ago, suddenly froze. Their focus shifted from Ava's team to the new threat in the sky. The ground quaked again as the first wave of human ships touched down, their heavy landing gear scraping the Earth's surface, a physical manifestation of hope. But Ava knew that this moment was only the beginning. The Empire was relentless, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. As the fleet landed, Ava heard the unmistakable roar of Empire war machines revving in the distance. The Empire wasn't about to surrender its hold on Earth. The battle was far from over. Hold your positions! Ava barked into the comms as she and her team raced toward the shuttle. Their only chance at survival was to get inside, get airborne, and join the fight in the skies. The Empire had underestimated humanity's resolve, but they had made a deadly mistake. Ava wouldn't let them get away with it. The shuttle's engines fired to life, and the hum of the familiar machinery filled the air. They weren't out of the woods yet, not by a long shot. The Empire's forces regrouped quickly, sending wave after wave of soldiers to intercept the newly arrived resistance. Ava's pulse quickened as she looked out of the shuttle's window, her gaze fixed on the battlefield. The Empire's soldiers were mobilizing, their machines forming a perimeter around the human ships, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Ava, we can't just sit here, Eric said, his voice tense. We need to engage. She nodded, knowing that this moment was the final tipping point. They had one shot to win this war. If they failed now, humanity would be lost forever. They had to make it count. Ava gripped the control stick, her hands steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about taking back Earth. It was about showing the Empire that humanity could not be extinguished, that they would rise from the ashes, no matter the cost. "Prepare for takeoff," Ava ordered, her voice calm, but every word carried the weight of everything they had fought for. Her team nodded, ready for what was to come. The shuttle's engines roared as they lifted off the ground, rising above the ruins of the battlefield. The sky opened up in front of them, the sight of the fleet stretching across the horizon like a wave of pure defiance. Ava's mind focused on the task at hand, getting to the heart of the Empire's forces and delivering a blow that would shake them to their core. As they ascended into the sky, the shuttle jolted violently, a burst of enemy fire striking the hull. Ava gritted her teeth, pushing the shuttle harder, gaining altitude. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the cockpit, but Ava wasn't about to let that stop her. She pushed the throttle forward, urging the shuttle toward the chaos unfolding in the distance. Eric's voice crackled through the comms again, the urgency in his voice unmistakable. "The Empire is sending everything they've got. We need to break through their defenses, or this is all for nothing." Ava didn't answer. She didn't need to. She could see the Empire's response, a massive warship rising from the clouds, its weapons primed and ready. The fight was about to escalate, and Ava knew they couldn't afford to hesitate. "We fight together," Ava said, her voice low and determined. "This is the last chance we'll ever get. We end this now." With that, Ava initiated the shuttle's primary weapons system, unleashing a barrage of missiles that streaked through the sky like fiery streaks of vengeance. The first wave of Empire warships exploded in a fiery ball of destruction, their remains scattering in all directions. But more were coming, swarming toward them like an unstoppable force. The shuttle banked sharply, dodging enemy fire as it tore through the battlefield. Ava's pulse quickened, but her focus never wavered. This was what they had trained for, what they had sacrificed everything for. She could feel the energy building inside her, the raw power of humanity's will to survive. Ava's eyes locked onto the Empire's flagship, a massive vessel that loomed over the battlefield like a dark omen. It was heavily guarded, its weapons systems glowing with lethal intent. But Ava didn't hesitate. She pushed the shuttle forward, plunging straight into the heart of the enemy's defenses. "Stay with me!" Ava shouted to her team as the shuttle rocketed toward the flagship. Her hands flew over the controls, guiding the shuttle with deadly precision. She could feel the heat of the Empire's retaliation, the thrum of their weapons targeting her shuttle. But there was no turning back now. If they didn't strike now, they would be crushed. With a deafening roar, Ava unleashed everything she had, the shuttle's full complement of missiles, all aimed at the flagship. The explosion that followed was unlike anything she had ever experienced. The Empire's warship disintegrated in a burst of fire and debris, its massive frame ripped apart by the sheer force of the blast. The Empire's forces faltered. The Resistance's victory was not yet complete, but Ava knew that this moment, this strike, would be the turning point. The Empire had underestimated humanity's will to survive, and now they would pay the price. The battle raged on, but Ava Calder stood firm. The fight for Earth was far from over, but it had shifted in humanity's favor. The final push had begun. And Ava would make sure the Empire would never rule Earth again.